Welcome, True Detective fans. We have made it to the finale, part 6 of Night Country. So I'm gonna get right into this recap. Make sure you like and subscribe, turn on your notifications, do what you need to do. Look at the previous recaps I went through, but let's get right into it. So I was right about some things, wrong about some things. The Salal men did it to themselves, according to the native women who were responsible for running them out into the snow and making sure that they died horrible deaths. Now, I thought it was the native community that was a part of the Salao killings, but I thought it would be the brother that would be Annie K's brother that would be the head of the movement to kill them and to the one that ran in the facility. But it was the women themselves. And it does make perfect sense because when you looked at who was wrong the most or who had the most to lose from Annie K's passing, besides the brother, it was the women. You have to think about all the stillbirths. You have to think about the clinic that Annie K had to make sure that the women were properly taken care of. All that has, is gone with Annie K's death. So more than anyone, the Native women had the biggest axe to grind with the murder of Annie K. Uh, the other thing I like really about the scene, talking about the ending scene where the women revealed what happened to the Salal scientists, you saw how they all gathered together. And it wasn't an intimidating thing. It was definitely a show of strength, but it wasn't a show of force. There's a big difference with that. A good example I can give you is that if you look at earlier episodes when Pete, Evangeline, and even Liz, when they went up to the camps, the native camps, that are kind of outside the jurisdiction of, I guess, the U.S. is the best way you can put it. When they came out of that previous engineer's home, the native men were out there with guns. They had their dogs. That was a show of strength. That was the kind of show that if you don't get off of this land, we have the authority to kill you. It was meant to intimidate. In the situation with the native women, when they were revealing how they killed the scientists, theirs was a show of strength. And the difference was they weren't trying to intimidate. They were just letting Liz and Evangeline know that if somebody's going to get locked up, it's going to be all of us. We're united as one. You can't separate us. We're taking responsibility for everything that happened. We're taking responsibility for our community. They made it a point to say, go to the cops. What point is that going to make? No matter how many times we try and do things the quote unquote right way, nothing ever changes. So in this situation, we chose to rewrite our own story and to take care of our community as we see fit, just as we see fit. And it wasn't ancient revenge or ritualistic revenge. I look at it as more as ancient retribution that they enacted on the scientists. They even reference an Inuit goddess of the sea. Her name is Sedna. And they talked about the fact that when they killed Annie K, and Annie K was kind of that spirit's vessel in human form, they awakened the spirit of the ice, and the ice is what came and took them. They were just disciples of the ice that put them out there, and they let nature take its course. Because as we know, in a lot of native traditions, you don't take more than what you need when you're living off the land. When you're hunting, if you kill an animal, you use every part of that animal. You don't waste what the land has given to you. And what Salal and all them were doing with the mining and the Silver Sky Company, they were completely exploiting the land and not giving anything back to the community. As a point, they looked at the community as expendable. When we hear Clark talking about how they were able to harvest that ancient DNA, it's literally by causing more pollution. So they had a vested interest in destabilizing and harming the community as much as possible to gain their profits and to move more into their research. So that was a really great scene to see all the women united like that. And another thing, this scene would not have happened if it wasn't for Evangeline finally getting her native name. That was one of the big subplots of this entire season and probably the most important. Without her name, Evangeline doesn't have her identity, she doesn't have her sense of self, and she doesn't have peace in her life. If you look at how she's been moving the entire season, she's almost been like a living ghost. She's been living between both worlds, the professional world, her as a trooper, and then also her as a native woman. She didn't belong in either. Every time she came across a native person, they're always asking her, what is your name? And she always gave them Evangeline Navarro because she did not know her native name. And finally, all this wandering out into the ice and these trances she'd been going through, this was all because her mother was reaching out to her to give her her true name. And as Rose has told us before, she gave us three rules when it comes to the supernatural, particularly ghosts. Three reasons why they come back. First reason, they just miss you, want to say hi. Second reason, they want to tell you something that's very important. And the third reason, which is the ominous one, is they want to take you with them. With Evangeline's case, it was the second reason. The mother wanted to finally give her her name, which she needed to bring Annie K's case to a close. Now, her name, I know I'm going to butcher it. I believe it's pronounced Suk Anyakna. I think that's how her name is pronounced. And her name actually means the was it the light that comes from the sun that comes from the long night. So basically, she's bringing light not just to herself but also to her community, which is very, very important. But the reason more than anything her name is important is she didn't give her true native name, they wouldn't have even been able to get in the house to talk to the native woman. If you really go back to that scene, very, very important. When she tells the woman her real native name, even Evangeline's posture and everything is different. She stands up straight. She kind of stands in front of Liz to take authority, and that makes them comfortable letting her in the house. And once she's in the house, the Native women, they only are addressing Evangeline. They're not talking to Liz. So the authority in this room is really the Native women. This is a Native woman issue, and they handled it as they see fit. And Liz is just there kind of as an observer. She tries to get up, and Evangeline takes her on the shoulder and says, sit down. I got this. I'll be able to handle this. And this is how they finally come to the understanding. So without her name, without her true native name, this case would not have been solved. So kudos to Evangeline finally getting that piece, finally getting her native name, and finally getting closure. Uh, as far as the supernatural tongue, that's the one thing that wasn't resolved. I said in my last recap that I wanted an answer on that. I was all over the place. I thought they were doing experimentations on part of Annie K's DNA, and that's how that all ties in. No, the tongue just appeared out of nowhere. The Native women don't know where it came from. So this is one of those clear supernatural things. I know we always look at the previous seasons with True Detective that it hints at the supernatural, but there's always a logical explanation. A lot of some of my viewers, they speculated that maybe there was something in the water causing hallucinations. I thought that was a great theory, but it turns out that no, this is just one thing that we're not going to get an answer on. And I think it's just purely supernatural. I think it's the spirit of the Sedna entity, which is known as the goddess of the sea, that was alluded to by the Native woman. I think that just symbolizes her voice, her connection of coming back to make sure that Annie K was avenged. That's the only explanation that really makes sense. A preserved tongue from a woman that's been gone for over 3 years that appears out of nowhere. And I think the Native women were being completely honest that they didn't know where this tongue came from or knew what Evangeline was talking about. So the only other answer would be supernatural. And I think one of the main things with Night Country is that it doesn't shy away from that. It point blank says there is a supernatural world out there. We get that in the Rose character, and Evangeline, talking to Liz about her deceased son, Holden, telling her that Holden is still out there and he sees you. So there's no ambiguity here. The supernatural world is completely real in Night Country, and it goes hand in hand with the natural world, the world that we can see. And the only way to be completely whole in Ennis is you have to embrace both of them, which Evangeline finally did, and also Liz in embracing that, her son Holden is finally at peace. So I think that's very remarkable. That's very different from all the other seasons. So I like that kind of twist for this season conclusion. The next thing I want to go into is that even though we kind of got a happy ending, Evangeline is still in danger. And what do I mean by her being in danger? When you are a whistleblower, when you expose a multi-million dollar international companies, there is a consequence. I want you to think of all the big whistleblowers we've had throughout the last couple decades, financially, military wise, these whistleblowers are not embraced. Even though they're doing the right thing, they are ostracized. And in this case, even though the mine is closed, the I think it's Tully International, their umbrella company, is still out there. So when the investigators come and talk to Liz, they mention, what are you going to do about the political unrest? The political unrest is the powers that be looking for a scapegoat. Who can we take down for losing our mind, losing all of our research, all the millions that we invested in Salah, in the mine, all that's gone. Somebody's head got to roll. Now, who do you think is the most vulnerable? It's still the native community, it's still the minority. So the first person they're going to zero in on will be Evangeline, especially because Liz's boss, he knows about the Wheeler case. So he's not going to pin it on Liz because number one, Liz didn't pull the trigger, even though she was a part of the cover up. The person that they can really put it on and blame would be Evangeline. And that's the reason why I think they're looking for her. Now, Liz, at this point, she's finally become a true ally. She's really putting skin in the game now because she's deliberately, as we can see from the last scene of the episode, actually hiding Evangeline or helping Evangeline kind of stay underground and away from these authorities, which is what she should be doing because her, as number one, chief of police, that gives her a lot of protection. Also a white woman, let's be honest, so she has a lot of armor that would prevent her from getting taken down and also sleeping with her boss. So they have even though he was, I think his name is Ted, he was really going at her and trying to blackmail her about the Wheeler case. I think he still has enough affection for her where he's not going to completely throw her under the bus. So Liz is in a position of power where she can protect Evangeline, which is what she is doing. And I think it's good now that Evangeline is kind of staying under the radar like that because there are going to be people that are out, have it out for her because she literally blew up the entire case. So I think she can also not only get protection from Liz, she also has that protection now from her native community because she knows her name. She's made a choice about her identity as a native woman, putting that as the priority. So she's completely safe now in Ennis and she can move between both worlds at ease. So even though it's a good ending, it's still a little bittersweet. Evangeline is still going to have to look over her shoulder a little bit. And that is also why I think she didn't just come back and live happily ever after with Cobbett. As much as he's been trying to embrace her, he loves her truly. It felt kind of bad for him. She has to keep her distance from him because, he's a sweetheart. He's not really built to handle that type of uh adversary as far as multi-million dollar or billion dollar conglomerates having their sights set on you. So it's kind of good that she's staying away from him like that, but I do feel bad for him because he was all in on Evangeline, but it's not meant to be. um Next thing I wanted to cover, we finally got some insight from Clark. We finally found out that he wasn't the person who initiated the killing of Annie K, claimed to love her. He eventually recorded the information that got the mind shut down. I want to know from you guys, do you consider Clark a sympathetic figure? Do you feel bad for him? Do you feel him and Annie K were star-crossed lovers, like a Romeo and Juliet situation? Do you really believe that he had Annie K's best interest at heart? Me personally, I don't think so. I still think he's a piece of shit. Didn't feel bad when he killed himself and froze his death. You know, you didn't stop her from getting stabbed 32 times. That's strike one for me. Strike two was, you're the one that suffocated her. I mean, even though she probably was not going to survive, you still are the one that ended her life. Her last moments was seeing or hearing the man that she loved killing her. So strike two. And then strike three, after it was all over, if you were really that scared and couldn't make a stand there against your fellow scientists, after the fact, you could have went to somebody. If you didn't feel comfortable, going to the mining facility, you could have went to the native community themselves, and they definitely would have helped avenge Annie K. It didn't do none of that. You just sat on it and let the guilt build and build and build. So I don't have any sympathy for him. I didn't feel any uh sadness about him killing himself, him getting beat up, him having to hear Annie K's murder over and over again when they put the headphones on him. So I don't have any sympathy for him whatsoever. And he also lied to Evangeline when they asked her, her and Liz asked him point blank, "Did you do anything that resulted in Annie K's death?" And he said no. He lied directly to them. That's part of why he was carrying all this guilt for so many years. So no sympathy for him. So when he died, I'm like, good riddance. But I want to know what you think. Let me know if I'm being too harsh about Clark. Um, Next thing I wanted to cover would be Evangeline and Liz. You know, the biggest thing also this episode was finally putting their demons to rest. I think a big thing this season showed, and the narrative that the director and writer Issa Lopez kept throughout the entire season is that if you do not check your demons, they will bleed over into everything that you do, your professional life, your personal life, your romantic life, how you raise your children, everything. Because Liz could not reconcile the loss of Holden, it bled over into everything. She said to Liz, I mean, she said to Evangeline when she was trying to get her to shut up when they had that final argument, is that I'm not a merciful person. And when you look at how she was behaving, when we first get introduced to her, she was not merciful with anyone. The way she was treating Pete, we looked at her as a mother figure, no boundaries. Her sleeping with all the married men in the community, no boundaries, no care for anyone else's relationships, just completely reckless. The way she talked to her daughter, didn't have any respect for her stepdaughter, her native roots, and her wanting to get in touch with her native community. Didn't respect any of that. So that was the burdens that she was carrying. We already went over the burdens Evangeline was carrying, as far as not knowing her native name, not being able to love properly, always pushing Kavik away, even though he wanted to be there for her, being haunted by Annie K's, passing, not feeling a part of the Native community. She even said, she uh, juxtaposed her life as feeling as she was living under the hatch and living in darkness and keeping the hatch closed from anybody getting in or out and just being in complete darkness and limbo. That's how her life felt compared to how Clark felt when he was preventing the Native women from getting into the hatch. She felt the same way, completely trapped. And that bled over into all aspects of her life. So them being able to finally exercise those demons, that makes them completely whole. And another person that was able to do that before it got to that point, like we saw with Evangeline and Liz, is Pete. Pete's life was starting to mirror his father's Hank's life. The fact that he was neglecting his family. He lost Layla, he got kicked out of the house. He was not paying attention to what was most important, which was his family. He was slowly going down the same route that Hank was going down. The only thing Hank had left was his job at that point. And because the only thing he had was his job, he was willing to compromise to move up, to do anything to, just to have any semblance of success. And when Pete had to bury Hank finally, out in the ice and in the water, Rose told him that you have to do it yourself. You have to be the one to put him into the water, this kind of ice funeral that they had going on. But she said the importance of doing that is that you're going to be closing the door. And to me, closing the door meant closing the door on those family curses that can permeate through generations if you don't know how to check them and put them in order and put them away. And I think symbolically, that's what Pete was doing, is putting that away and starting a new beginning with Layla and his son, and causing a break with that those issues that were brought on him from Hank and the actions that Hank did. So a lot of people were able to kind of break those curses and those demons. So very good on that aspect as far as somewhat of a happy ending, even though Rose said you're going to be carrying this trauma for the rest of your life for killing your dad, but at least you won't be hopefully uh, taking on some of the same negative characteristics that he did. So happy ending of sorts for Pete. Uh, my little controversial take, which I want to get from everybody. Season is concluded, got 6 episodes. We heard from the original creator of True Detective, was not a fan of this season tying into the original season with the flat circle and spiral and everything. So with all that said, my little hot take is I feel storyline wise that this is the strongest True Detective season since season one. I feel really comfortable saying that with the story. I thought the story was very engaging. I thought they were very clear with the supernatural aspects, so they didn't shy away from that. They made it very clear that some things were completely supernatural here. I think the Native American mythology played in well with that, and also how it ties into capitalism and industry and how that can affect minority communities and destabilize them. I think it all went really well. I think they could have went more in depth if they had maybe 8 episodes. I think a full Annie K flashback episode would have been really, really good to kind of drive home how devastating it was to lose someone like that in the community. Just think about families that we've seen, even families we've been a part of, when a grandmother passes away, or whatever central figure that is kind of the glue for the family. Once that person goes away, everybody kind of scatters in different directions. That can also happen with communities. So with Annie K, she was kind of that glue for the entire community. And it was shattering to see her, to lose her, and the way that they lost her, where she was brutally murdered with her body being discarded. That, I think, fractured the community, and the community has never truly recovered from losing someone like Annie K. So I think a full episode flashback of that character and all that she did and how important she was could have drove that home a little bit better. But I think overall, storyline wise, just the different elements, the Twin Peaks kind of eeriness and mythology that we got some horror elements. A lot of people reference the Thing as far as the corpsicle. So I thought all of that played together really well. And I think we also got a satisfying ending. So storyline wise, I do think this is the strongest season since season one. Now, acting wise, that's where it's a little different. I think everybody did a really good job here, but when I think of outside of season one, the best acting, I'll probably go to season three. I think the dynamics between Mahershala Ali and Stephen Dorff, I think that was stronger than what we saw here between Evangeline and Liz. And Kaylee Reese, who played Evangeline, I think she did a great job. I just think she didn't have enough range with this character to say that the acting between the main characters was as good as season three. I think the one downside with Evangeline's character is that she was mostly kind of one note, kind of that strong brooding type for the majority of the episodes. I think in 4 and 5, she started showing more emotions when her sister Jules committed suicide. We started getting different aspects of the fear that she was holding on to. So that was good to see. But I think overall, Ali and Stephen Dorff, I give them the edge as far as the best acting since season one. And that's no shade to Kaylee Reese. I mean, Mahershala Ali and Stephen Dorff are veteran actors of decades. So, that's no shade to what we saw. But I think acting wise, I would say season three, I would put as the best in season one. Season two, the less said about that, the better. Yeah, season two is just such a mess. It was so disappointing coming off of season one. Had some good things in it, so I'm not going to completely trash it. But as you can see, I'm not a huge fan of what we got in season two. So I would say that I think storyline wise, Night Country has been the best and most engaging to me. And most ambitious also since season one. But I know people have been polarized by everything that we've seen this season, including the original creator of True Detective. So I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know if I'm off base and what your favorite season is outside of season one. As far as closing thoughts, I really like the Rose character. I don't know the actress's name offhand. She was another one that I feel was in complete balance between the rational world and the supernatural spiritual world. She's somebody that was an academic before she came to Ennis. And she's come here, she's completely ingratiated herself in the community, and she's completely comfortable. There's like no situation that can come up that scares her. People coming up to her, Pete came up and said, I got some bodies I need for you to dispose of. She knew exactly what to do. Ghosts appeared to her, sending her to corpsicles, no problem there. So, even the miniseries with Rose, I think would be kind of engaging. Just her life overall. Just imagine what she's seen in the decades, she's been in Ennis. So great backstory with her. One of my favorite characters of this season. Uh, Also, as far as like the cinematography, when they first went into Night Country, when they first went into the caves at the beginning of part six, one thing that might be overlooked that I really like that kind of set the tone for the entire episode, when they go underground, Look at how the ice is shining. It almost looks like the light reflecting off our eyes. It's kind of like the caves are watching them. And then you hear the whispering in the background. I think Issa did a really good job of setting the ambience right away of knowing that this is a completely different world. Now that we're underground, now that we're in night country, the rules are different down here. So I really love that scene setting with that particular cinematography. And also later on, after Evangeline and Liz had that, come to Jesus moment, afterward, you see the northern lights. They're watching them on the outside. And I like how that symbolized the new year's beginning. There is hope. There is new light coming into the world. They're seeing things differently, but everything is not peachy. It's not no big sun coming out with rainbows and everything. It's still dim. There's still work to be done. It's still kind of bittersweet. So I kind of like that kind of ambiance that's symbolized by the northern lights. I really think that was good direction right there. Anything I can think of. I think that kind of sums up the entire episode. Trying to think. Oh, one thing I mentioned in my last point. I said normally the biggest evil gets away unscathed. My last recap, I was talking about Kate, the owner of the mining company. I said don't expect her to be brought to justice because people like that high up seem to always get away. Somebody else either takes the fall, but they never get locked up. We saw it, I mentioned before, with the financial crisis that we went through in 2008, all that illegal activity that was done by the heads of banks and all that. Did any of them go to jail? Yeah, they had the dog and pony show in front of Congress where they got chewed out, some of them, but then they went back to their mansions, resigned, whatever they need to do, no jail sentence whatsoever. Now let me and you go out somewhere and steal somebody's purse or steal $50 and we're getting locked up for 10, 15 years. So that just kind of shows you that the money and power behind people like that, they seem to always get away. Kate wasn't even in this episode. As far as we know, the mining company is shut down, but I'm pretty sure she's landed on her feet some other place and probably still has her tentacles in the political aspect of Ennis, and that's why they're still looking for Evangeline. So that was another bittersweet thing about people like Kate, but that is realistic. That's what happens in the real world. So that's my recap of Night Country Part 6. Thoroughly enjoyed the season. Like I said, my little bold take is I feel this is the best season since season one. Let me know what you think. I know some people probably will disagree. Um, Let me know other shows that you may want me to recap. Not sure offhand. I may be doing BMF for Stars. There's also a show coming out, I believe, called Manhunt, which is about the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And there was actually a conspiracy behind that, if you don't know, a conspiracy like JFK level conspiracy that a lot of us don't talk about. So I'm really kind of intrigued to see that show. So that might be the next one that I cover. But any ideas, let me know. Thank you for coming on me with this journey through 6 episodes, over 6 hours of content. Thank you to Kelly Reese, Jodie Foster, Issa Lopez, everybody involved with this show. I had a great time covering it, and I can't wait until we get True Detective season 5. And what will we like to see covering in that? I really don't know offhand, but I can't wait. We have to keep the series going. So take care, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will see you next week to talk about some other show. Take care.